you want to make sure you don't repeat. You want to make sure that your skills, the return on your investments are not diminishing. There's only so much that people will pay for certain skills.
So think about it for a second. Let's use an example from our industry. You're an antivirus company. You're Symantec. We all know that they don't have signatures for every virus. Why not? They could. You could hire 1,000 signature developers, and you could make a massive team, and you could spend a huge amount of money to make sure that you had all the signatures, or at least as close to all as statistically possible. But there's no point, because they couldn't possibly sell the product for enough. It wouldn't be enough of a competitive advantage to sell the product enough to justify the spend. Same thing in working on your strengths. You can only be so good at one thing before it stops mattering. Before it's, you can only be a great researcher to a certain point before being any better at it doesn't get you any more sales effectively.
Well, the other thing is this, is that as more and more people acquire the same skill, people talk a lot of times in sports, they'll talk about the value over an average player. So in other words, if the average center fielder, anybody like baseball? But if the average center fielder hits 275 and hits 10 home runs and drives in 60 runs, well, that's the average person. So to build that the next step, you're not thinking about, well, how much added value is if my center fielder hit 280, hit 15 home runs, and drove in 85 runs. So it's kind of like you start thinking yourself about what's the added incentive to get better? Is my time best spent getting better at something I'm already good at? Or is my time better spent focusing on things in areas that I'm deficient in and getting them to a point where they become skills, where I take a weakness and I drive it to become a skill? Because when you start thinking about when you apply for positions, what you're trying to do is to get a position that's going to accelerate your career development. And the only way that you're going to be able to do that is by proving to others that you have the additional skills necessary to make you a qualified candidate for that role. So spending that time building and developing weaknesses that matter to your evolution as an information security leader is extremely important.
And the ability to communicate that ultimately comes down to sales.
How many people have a sales component in their current role? We all have sales components. Every day in our jobs, security professionals, whether you work internally for a company in a corporate security team, work externally as a consultant or a product vendor, you have to sell the concept of security. You're selling the importance of your job. You're selling the importance of you actually being there. You have to think of yourselves as your own personal sales force. And you have to convince others that you have value beyond the value that they're currently employing you for.
Does anybody here know the story of Thomas Edison and Nikola Tesla and how they were sort of intertwined? Why does everybody know Edison and nobody knows Tesla? It's because Edison was a great salesperson. They were both great inventors. But Edison sold his ideas, and Tesla sat in a lab and came up with crazy stuff and was the traditional mad scientist. And the difference between being famous through all of history and being a crackpot admired by a few is sales. We sometimes think, especially in the more lofty sort of academic ways that we often get around Blackhat and conferences like it, that the people with the best ideas are the ones that win. Nope. Sorry. Hey, it's one of those sad but true facts of life that you can be the smartest person in the room, but if you can't communicate that, if you can't sell that, you're done.
When you stop selling yourself, your career will die. You will become more and more irrelevant. Others will pass you by. I mean, you could probably see, this is, I've been to every Blackhat. This is, like, I guess 13 years at this. I remember it was like 100 people at the hotel's not even there anymore. But if you think about it, I remember meeting people at that conference that are not even in the industry anymore. A lot of the people's skills are irrelevant. You know, they became the last buggy whip maker. They stopped being out there. They got tired. Sales is perpetual. And, you know, you said before when Mike asked the question about, you know, who's your current customer? And you said, but you know what, though? You had the right answer to this question. I mean, who's your potential customer? And that's the answer, is everyone is your potential customer. You're always interviewing for your next position. You're interviewing for every day when you go to work. You're interviewing it through your social networks. You're interviewing here at the conference when you meet people at Blackhat. That impression that they get, just being able to kind of, that interaction that they have with you is going to become memorable at some point in time.
Let me jump in and ask a random question. How many people have ever written a sales letter? Thank you for jumping ahead. Nicely done.
You've seen the talk before.
Yeah,
I'm on the hotel's wireless, so you might be on my.
Yeah.
I trust everybody.
Like what? 10% of you put your hands up. But if I asked you how many of you have a resume, I bet there's nobody in the room that doesn't. Well, what's a resume? It's a brochure for you. It's a sales letter for you, right? If you think about it that way, it becomes a very different tool. Because we were all taught, and Lee said it earlier, we don't live in our parents' world. We don't live in the world that, you know, you come out of college and you send a nicely formatted CV via the mail to a response to an ad in the local newspaper classifieds. A resume is a sales letter. A resume is a sales letter that says, hey, I might be calling on you later. You've all dealt with salespeople at some point if you've walked through this conference. They get your email address when they scan your badge, and then they send you something. Well, that's exactly what you're doing when you're sending a resume.
If you think about, you know, where everybody being your potential customer, I think that, you know, one of the things that people forget is that they go to places or they put themselves in position where they don't have unique skills, where, you know, they want to speak at a security conference, as opposed to if you wanted to become the chief information security officer in the healthcare industry, instead of speaking at a security event, you might want to start gravitating to go to healthcare events. So the idea is this, is that you have to go to places when you're selling yourself, to places where you are the unique one. You go to places where you are the oddity, where you have information that people can't get anywhere else in the room. You become that expert. And you think about it, when you have a product need and there is a solution that really will solve your problem, you might be the one that calls the salesperson. I mean, how easy would it be to interview for a position if somebody called you up and said, hey, we have an opening and we think you'd be perfect for it? Not much of an interview process, right? How much different is that than if you just send your resume to some blind website and, you know, you're one of 150 people in the black hole of monster.com or some internal HR function? You think about that. You have to seek out opportunities. You're always out there selling yourself. And you know, you could sell yourself in ways where just by volunteering yourself, getting out there and trying to help others, help people in your current companies solve security problems. Go beyond your job descriptions. Build friends within your organization that become folks that count on you. Think about what people are going to think about you in your job if you become the person that they count on to help them solve security problems. Think about when the next internal promotion comes up and they ask others, Who do you think we should give it to? Well, if an executive VP in an organization says, you know what, I don't know much about security, but Patty, she really solves my problems for me every time I have something. She's great. She communicates well. Everything's done timely. Why don't we give it to Patty? You think about who your audiences are. You touch your audiences every day. Going the extra mile for people is the way to sell things to people without being overtly selling them. You think about walking into a car dealership. I mean, how many, you can't even get out of your car without getting swarmed, right? You don't want to be that person. You want to sell through knowledge. You want to sell through the fact that people are going to like you. You want to sell through that relationship. You want to build those relationships, and those relationships can be found everywhere. In your job, in industry events, online, you name it.
And ultimately that brings up the next question of marketing. Because sales and marketing go hand in hand.
Does anybody have understanding how marketing differs from sales?
What's the difference?
Nobody? All right, good, we got a customer. Okay. Anybody else? Marketing is the preparation for the sale.
That's good.
Market awareness, Carol? Managing perception. I think those are all good answers. Yeah. To me, selling is almost the act and marketing is almost the method, right? I mean, that's how I kind of look at it. I kind of look at, marketing really becomes, marketing might be the bow and the nice wrapping paper on top of the actual package itself. So, you talk about marketing, you have to really talk about branding and building the brand. Companies spend millions and billions of dollars to build that brand.
And ultimately, that's all about one thing. The purpose of marketing is really simple. And you can measure a successful marketing program, in my opinion, as somebody who does a lot of marketing, by one thing. How many leads do you have? Marketing is lead generation. How many leads, how many people out there are aware of what you do and are interested enough to talk to you about it? That's when sales starts. Sales starts when the lead shows up. As Lee says, that's when the act starts. But marketing is the act of creating awareness in all the people who could potentially be interested in you about what you do, about what your product is.
But in marketing, there's also a big difference between an unqualified lead, just that email that gets sent, and a qualified lead, somebody who can actually have an impact on your career.
So, your high school best friend who's not in this industry is an unqualified lead.
Sure. The chief security officer at a major Fortune 500 company would be a very qualified lead.
Exactly. So, I ask you to think about it. How many people